Okay, so here we are, February meeting, Bike and Pedestrian Safety Committee. Can I get a motion to open the meeting?
Motion.
I make a motion, we open the meeting?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. First thing we can do is approve the minutes from the last meeting, which Sherry emailed to everyone. I was okay with it. And how about you, Art?
Yeah, me too.
I make a motion to
Fine.
accept the minutes.
Make a motion, we accept the minutes?
He just,
Oh, you did, okay. A second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll get this one of these days.
Okay. The bike safety classes, okay, that is actually, I have it on here, it's now officially scheduled for Thursday, March 26th,
Fabulous.
and it's going to be at the middle school with Colleen she's from Mass Safe Routes to School. And she's gonna spend the day there basically working, she's gonna teach some big safety classes. They're gonna break up the day. We'll go through the schedule next month because it's gonna be time. We'll post it or whatever, but it's in school, so it's not, anything anybody really needs to
So
know.
what day is this going to be?
It's gonna be on a Thursday,
I know.
March 26th.
26th. Yeah, I should put the date.
Not, yeah, there's no date there.
I read it here, March 26th in our minutes.
Yeah.
March 25th?
6th.
March 6th.
2/6,
2/6.
26.
Oh, I see already, okay. 2/6.
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, next month we'll really finalize the actual times and everything.
Excellent.
Street signs, flags for crosswalk. Well, as far as the flags, I don't really know. I haven't really looked into that, but or the street signs, because that's something like ongoing. We're gonna, if we see one missing, if we see an empty pole, which I have around town, and just make a note of it so we can find out what the sign is that's supposed to be there. And then on a side note, as far as sidewalks, I saw people were complaining about the sidewalks in the center of town not being plowed on lines, so I messaged Selectman Hinckley, and he said that because it was frozen, they couldn't clear it, but they were working on it. They couldn't clear it with a snow blower, so they had to use something else. So and now actually, as you can see, they're cleared, because we just talked about that earlier. So yeah, they did a great job. And that's helped, because I just saw people walking near the cemetery on my way in tonight on the sidewalk. So. Okay, next. Number 5, the town is working on a complete streets prioritization plan. And they had a little setup at the library last week, and they have a website that you can go to and take a survey, and it's to try to, help make getting around town safer, whether you walk, bike, drive, use a wheelchair, push a stroller, or take the bus. The town wants streets that work better for all users. So, I don't know how we could, if you wanna.
Can we put this on like all things Acushnet?
Yeah,
Can we just post it?
I can do it.
You want to do it, or I can do whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we can post I'm not sure how long that survey's up for, but we can probably post the QR code and the information, the link online.
Yeah.
All right, so we just finished our
Down to John.
little business, so now, here we are. John Gray from Serped is here to talk about middle road safety.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I guess I'm thinking about, obviously Nicole was talking, I'm assuming, about the complete streets prioritization plan. My question would just be, sort of where that sort of process is currently, so I have kind of a little understanding of that process, because I think it might connect into the Middle Road conversation as well. But yeah, I mean, I think for Middle Road, like it's a wider road. I'm not sure of the width on it. I would, obviously, I would love to see any, a bike pedestrian plan. I would love to see any kind of improvements. I think I might look to go in a different direction than Middle Road, and here's why. Putting lanes, like bike lanes, on Middle Road seemingly would be, a relatively straightforward process. I think it would be not a insurmountable expense. But I think one of the things that that I find is when facilities are built, but they're not like a high comfort facility. So the difference between sort of like a lane that's like unprotected and a shared use path is substantial. And so when we're thinking about how we want to kind of prioritize and build out sort of the sidewalks and bike infrastructure within the community, I think you first have to think about where do we want to prioritize the sort of like the high comfort facilities. And you can almost think of that as like your interstate highway system. Like if you don't have an interstate highway system, it gets a lot more convoluted. And so the reason why I suggested potentially not, I know you'd asked me to come in to talk about, Middle Road, and I don't want to totally, shut down that idea. I think it's a great project. It's just that I think, obviously protecting children riding is like a big priority, and getting children to have a better connection between their school and the library, I think is needed. But I don't know if, lanes on Middle Road would be something that, parents would like feel super comfortable, with their kids, going on, So I think obviously, the library and the schools are important destinations to get to. I think I would, sort of think through like, okay, well, if Middle Road, if there's an opportunity to do like a reconstruction of it or something where or just adding a path along one side, like a separated path off of one side, that would definitely be something that would facilitate more ridership. And so the statistics that, bike lanes versus paths, it's like, I'm happy to follow up and send some of this resource. Anything I mentioned, feel free to make a note of and reach out to me to send it to you. But there's a resource called the Federal Highway Bikeway Selection Guide. And they sort of have a breakdown of what I'm sort of discussing, kind of the separation and distinction between like a high comfort network and kind of like a basic, what they refer to as like a basic bikeway network. And it's basically like sub 10% of folks, general public wise, so it's around like 7 to 9% of folks feel comfortable using bike lanes. But once you show them a picture of a shared use path and say, would you use this? All of a sudden that number goes up to like 60%. And then there's like 30% of folks that just say, I'm never gonna ride a bike ever. Like there's nothing you can do or say that will change my mind. So there's about 30% of folks that are just not going to use biking infrastructure, and that's fine. But I think, for me, one of the things that I really want anytime I'm interfacing with like local boards and committees is like emphasizing, 7-9% versus 60%. It's huge, and I think it really is the kind of thing where it's worth your while to kind of consider that, like, okay, is this going to be a high comfort facility? If not, is there like an alternate route to do, like a low stress option? But yeah, it's so one of the alternatives that I would just propose, and it's not to say that I don't think that the library and the school should be connected in a bikeway network. They absolutely should be. But I think one of the things you have to think about when you're building that kind of high comfort network in Acushnet would be, what are existing bike paths? No, not much in terms of like paved shared use paths that I'm aware of, at least. And what is already in the pipeline? And then, okay, now that we know what we have and what's in the pipeline, what do we think makes sense as like the next step? And the reason why I bring that up is because South Main Street obviously has this plan for like a shared use path down the whole length of it. And that's like a pretty significant length, and it connects right into, Acushnet Center. And obviously you've got the Fairhaven, Phoenix Rail Trail sort of, as like a further down. It's not directly connected to South Main, but I did see, I believe Fairhaven, I want to say, submitted a grant application for protected bike lane, buffered bike lanes along one of the streets. It might be Alden. I want to say Alden Street.
They
There's
did
lanes.
They did
Paint.
lanes.
There's
painted
paint there,
lanes
yeah.
now,
Okay.
so.
So Fairhaven obviously knows about wanting to connect into South Main, and so I think of that as a great opportunity to say, okay, how can we leverage that project and think about almost ways to complement it. Secondly, I think the other thing that comes to mind would be right across your border in New Bedford, right? So you've got South Coast Rail. They just built a station on Church Street, which is your closest MBTA station, and so that's sort of already a transit destination that folks in Acushnet would seemingly want to get to. And there is a project that's in the works. It's in like the pre-25% design state, so it's still open for comments and critiques. Is for Tarkiln Hill Road, and so
Cool.
they're planning it's at least a mile or two of Tarkiln Hill Road that they're going to reconstruct, and that project should have a shared use path as a part of it. If it does not have a shared use path as a part of it, Serpent would be very vocally trying to change that design to include a shared use path, because it is considered like a high potential for everyday biking kind of corridor, and obviously for folks that are riding to get to the Church Street station, whether they're in North End of New Bedford or Acushnet, they're going to be using that corridor every day. And so, I think of that other project, and I think, okay, well, how can maybe you link those, with South Main and then Tarkiln Hill Road? Maybe there's an opportunity to maybe build a little connection or prioritize a connection between those, connect into your housing authority and your town center, and that kind of. So that's just something that I would just throw out there as like an opportunity. I know that is Acushnet in the process of updating the master plan right now?
Yes.
Has it been already drafted and approved, or is it sort of in the?
I don't know if it has.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that might be something to sort of note in the master plan is, that's essentially like an alternate route for the South Coast Bikeway, and so anytime Acushnet, obviously, anytime you can link your local priority to a regional priority, it elevates it, and it makes it harder to ignore for like a mass DOT, sort of design. And so I mentioned all of that to say, the kind of how do you build that network and grow it is completely like a local decision. And I do think that, like I think you were probably talking about Middle Road because it's just a wide road that can be repurposed.
Yeah, we
was-
thought it'd be
it
an
was-
easy sort of.
Right,
starting
right,
place.
and yeah, and I think honestly, I'm giving some thoughts off the top of my head, but I think I would probably try to talk to the is it the Department of Public Works in the Acushnet? Talk to the Department of Public Works to get a sense of things that might not be apparent about Middle Road that they would know. So like random things like culverts or plans that they already have to add like a sidewalk or something like that. So I think the Middle Road project, I think that it absolutely should be a part of the Complete Streets prioritization plan. I just think that if the town of Acushnet were to apply for like a Complete Streets grant, the Middle Road project, bike lanes or shared use path, whatever that possible linkage would be, I think that grant, although it connects a school to a library, I don't think it would score as highly as
No.
a project that's building off of like the
That's connected,
South
yeah,
Main
right.
or connecting to a Tarkin Hill Road project or something like that. And the sort of one of the maps that I can share as well is like it's the potential for everyday biking. And they have a statewide map that sort of maps out roads across every municipality, and each road is ranked in terms of like its potential for everyday biking. And I would say obviously like Acushnet, or I should say New Bedford obviously has lots of high potential areas. Tarkin Hill Road is like one of them, and Ashley Boulevard, all these major roads Acushnet have. Once you get to Acushnet Center, I think it becomes more of like medium potential for everyday biking. And then obviously, as you get more rural, it becomes more of like a low potential for everyday biking. So I think that is sort of like my general thoughts, and like I'm happy to answer any questions you have about anything I've just said. But I do think that that conversation with the Department of Public Works, maybe they already want to do this, and there's like a large appetite to do bike lanes on Middle Road, and they like really want to do that. And I would say in that case, okay, maybe I'm changing my whole plan, because I think you kind of want to figure out where are the ships already steering, and then figure out how can we start to build this bike network locally in a way that isn't like a drastic change from what the town sort of already has in mind. And so that's sort of how I would think about it. And yeah, just harping back on it, because I think it is important to kind of emphasize, is like, okay, where's those high comfort facilities? Because that's really where the high comfort facilities is really your facilities that actually serves
Most
like
effective.
older adults,
Most effective.
with limited mobility or limited vision, young people that are, they're 15, they don't have a permit, but they want to get to their friend's house or something. And so those high comfort facilities serve everyone that's willing to, walk or bike.
Sure.
And the lower stress facilities, that's a lane on a road, it's going to serve a percentage of folks, but I worry because there is instances in the Serpent region where we've seen like a community say like, oh, this road is super wide, and I'll just mention it because I'm working on a memo for them right now, but in the town of Wareham, Onset Avenue is like a road that kind of goes right into Onset Village, and it's super wide. It's like 40 feet wide in a lot of places, and it's at least like a mile or two of like 40 feet wide. And back in 2013, the town of Wareham added bike lanes onto it. But now it's 2026. There hasn't been any other bike infrastructure that's been built to connect into it. the bike lanes are like faded and
Sure.
basically completely untouched. And I think, it's almost, if they had said, okay, we're gonna, instead of doing a 5-foot bike lane over here and a 5-foot bike lane over here and forgetting about them in 13 years or whatever, if instead they said, okay, we're gonna combine those, we're gonna put a path off to one side that's 8 to 10 feet
Something
wide
like a
and put a
sprint.
barrier or something that provides like a level of safety that people walking benefit from, or people biking, obviously, if they have a barrier, it's, going from that 7-9% much higher. It's sort of like, that's kind of a missed opportunity, right? And I think, it's separate, anytime you're going from like the lower stress infrastructure or higher stress infrastructure, but like bike lanes to a path, there's a bunch of questions that come up, and it's more difficult for the Department of Public Works to manage a path and a road as opposed to just a road with bike lanes. But that's sort of, yeah. And I'm fully open to being told off and critiqued and saying, John, that's a terrible idea. Why did you propose it? But that's just one thing that I wanted to come and kind of like maybe spur some kind of discussion about that kind of like high comfort versus low comfort and priorities and things like that.
So we'd have to ask the DPW what their plans are, basically, if they have any at all.
Right. I mean, I assume they're probably working with the Complete Streets planning process. So, I think to some extent what their local priorities are, as far as like the local DPW, where they want to put sidewalks, where they want to put bike lanes or paths, it's probably going to end up in like the draft Complete Streets prioritization plan, because they're working for the town, and so the town's saying, here's sort of
Here's
our
what we wanna
ideas.
work on.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, is Nicole still on? I don't know.
She's there.
Nicole, I
I
guess,
am.
yeah, Nicole, I guess I'm just curious if you have had conversations with the town yet in terms of where the local Department of Public Works has sort of indicated they are planning to, or prioritize specific like locations so far.
Yeah, definitely. So we've met with the town, and it kind of sounds like, in terms of maintenance, they're more focused on maintaining the existing network that is out there. It kind of sounds like the DPW is pretty short on resources right now. So what we're doing kind of on the Complete Streets prioritization plan right now, we're still kind of in our initial process. So we had a public kind of pop-up event a couple of weeks ago. We have an online survey that's going right now, and we have just about 100 responses on that, which is really great, kind of identifying a lot of barriers and opportunities out there. But just to touch on Middle Road, that is a road that kept coming up consistently throughout our public outreach efforts. There's no bike lanes out there, there's no sidewalks out there, and we got some anecdotal information at the library that the schools that are on there actually have a lot of queuing on the road. So I would also, John, be hesitant to put bike lanes on the road, as they would likely be blocked a lot of the times. The other thing about Middle Road, and we're going through, kind of our existing conditions analyses right now, but we're looking at, volumes and speeds, specifically because Acushnet doesn't have really any bike facilities. So if we are going to be recommending some priority locations, we want to make sure that those are applicable and safe for the volumes and the speeds that are occurring on these roads. So Middle Road actually has like an 85th percentile speed of like almost 45 miles per hour, and right off the bat there, John mentioned there's this Federal Highway Administration bikeway selection guide, and there's a table right in that report. And John, I can follow up with Lori and send that. But there is some information about, volume versus speed and what type of bike accommodation is applicable for that type of roadway. And when you're sitting at a 45-mile-per-hour roadway, a shared use path or a separated bike facility is definitely recommended over anything with a bike lane. I'll also say that, Middle Road right now is very wide, and between the library and the schools, it's a straightaway. So that's just encouraging a lot of speed. So definitely where you have, school-age children walking between the library and the schools, we would definitely recommend, a separated path there. So all of these things that John mentioned as well, the Tarkin Hill improvements that are happening in New Bedford, the Fairhaven improvements on Alden Road, all of these things, looking at the South Coast Bikeway and kind of the blue lane for New Bedford, we're kind of looking at those areas and how can we tie into those networks as well. That's not to say that Middle Road will not be in the prioritization plan. It absolutely will be. It's clearly a local priority for the residents. So we're kind of, taking all of these data sets and figuring out the best way to rank them. And that being said, this prioritization plan does give, the town kind of a roadmap to move forward, but like the ranking doesn't hold the town accountable for implementing projects in that manner by any means. Just kind of, a framework, if you may. So that's kind of where we are in the process of things, and we're starting to, really take a lot of that public outreach that we're hearing, all of our existing conditions, and starting to come up with that draft list of projects. All of, John, everything that you touched on, that's all in our potential list. Serpide also did a regional pedestrian plan and a regional bicycle plan, so we're looking at those and incorporating, those and how can we tie into that, as well as, there was a safety action plan in there as well, so we're looking at those segments and those intersections that coming up as a, safety risk or a high risk. So that's kind of where we're at in the process, and it sounds like, what I'm saying and John, what you're saying are very much in line. And I think, Acushnet has, it's kind of a blank slate, which is, exciting. There's a lot of opportunities there, but definitely, like, how do we prioritize where we're, kind of building that network to make sense in the grand scheme of things.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate all that feedback. One additional question I have for you. At the recent public meeting, aside from Middle Road, was there other streets or areas or places that came up?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Main Street, South Main Street, Slocum Street, all of these kind of, minor arterials and collector roads. Lake Street was another one. There's a reservoir there. There's like a little spurt of sidewalk, but no way to get to that little spurt of sidewalk. In terms of biking, like Hathaway Road, Wing Road, Mattapoisett, Mendel, excuse me. So a lot of these more connector roads and arterials are, continually popping up, and, within the existing conditions data as well, that's where, crashes are occurring. Another area is Hope Street and Garfield, I want to say. There were 2 pedestrian crashes down there that we'll be focusing on, as well as some cut-through traffic. So that intersection at Main and South Main, when that's backed up, folks will cut down the side streets, often at, carrying some speed, so that becomes a safety issue as well. So these are all things that we're hearing, but mostly, targeted towards those more major streets.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, and a lot of times, those major streets are sort of like the barrier for someone. Someone might feel comfortable biking down their street or their subdivision, but they have a dangerous feeling intersection that's between point A and point B, and just because of that one intersection,
They will
it makes
not.
it so that it's not really like a
Yep.
bikeable trip for them.
Yep.
And so, kind of like figuring out those like high stress areas and like what are the ways to kind of like address that. Nicole, one additional question I had for you was there was so Serpent has been working on the master plan for Acushnet, and one of my colleagues had reached out to me asking about like the power lines sort of running along the Acushnet River on like the river side, so essentially like running parallel to South Main Street. And then there's also sort of the power lines that run sort of north of the quarry area that I believe come like off of South Main and then sort of like loop around like almost like the perimeter of Acushnet Center and then go, I think, north, sort of northeast-ish. And so for me, thinking about those other kind of concepts of like they're not existing roads and they are, easements, most likely not like property ownership. I thought that, although I think, if I had all the money in the world, putting a bike path along the Acushnet River like would be amazing. I would love it. But to me, since the South Main project is sort of already in the works, that's a parallel facility, to the Acushnet River, and so I would say, kind of the path along the riverfront, I think, would be something that I would pursue if there was like private entities that could maybe provide like a path. So like Buzzards Bay Coalition,
Yeah.
I want to say they're like redoing a whole like former junkyard area along
Yeah,
the
it's
Acushnet River.
finished. Yeah.
It's finished.
It's finished?
Yeah.
Okay, and so, yeah, I mean, if they were, and then further down in Fairhaven, I want to say the Buzzards Bay Coalition also did the, where there's the radio towers on the waterfront there.
Marsh Island.
Marsh Island,
Marsh Island.
yeah, and so they added, some paths through
Walking
there.
paths, yes.
Walking paths through there. So, yeah, that connecting down to Marsh Island and like the walking path along there would be great. But yeah, so I was thinking, maybe along the Acushnet River, maybe that's not like the priority right now because you already have that South Main. But I was kind of interested to some extent in the power lines, sort of north of the quarry, just because I believe it is owned. It's property owned by National Grid, I want to say. Is your local public utility National Grid or Eversource? Or Eversource. Okay. It might not be Eversource, but I want to say it's owned by a local public utility. And I want to say that there's already sort of like a dirt access road. So it might be one of those things where that utility may allow, recreational use of the utility line, and unclear whether that might be something that that could be maybe thought about as far as the complete streets prioritization plan, because the complete streets prioritization plan, I think, is for the most part, especially for a rural community like Acushnet, you're really not trying to build a whole lot of new infrastructure if you can avoid it. So I kind of hesitate to make that suggestion, but that is just one additional thing, Nicole, I guess I just wanted to just throw on your radar as the person working on the complete streets prioritization plan, as if there are utility corridors that are, owned by the utility and already have, an existing sort of walking path along it, it might be an opportunity to kind of like another kind of way to build almost a spur off of that South Main project as well.
So I'd be curious.
Absolutely.
I would be curious because heading towards Fairhaven, the utility lines on this side of the street have that sort of walking path, right, where you can see it when you go by the access road. But on the other side, it's an actual road that goes back to like some businesses or something back there. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure
Okay.
if it's,
I want to say I saw in the southern part of sort of Acushnet Center, or maybe some of the subdivisions south from there. I want to say there may be some paper streets that like connect in to that utility line sort of corridor as well. So that would be something I want to say I recall seeing. Like the street grid for Acushnet.
Yeah.
Even where it's not a road that's actually paved, but the actual like laid out right of way for the public looked like it may actually connect into that utility corridor in some spots. But I think the other thing too, which I can follow up with, is it's called the level of traffic stress. So it's basically a ranking of every road on a 1 to 5 scale. 5 being most stress, 1 being lowest stress. 5 would be an interstate highway that does not allow bicycle or pedestrians on it. So it's really more like a 1 to 4 scale, with roads that are ranked 1 and 2 as low stress because they're low traffic or low speed or both. And then the streets that are ranked 3 or 4 are your more stressful sort of, your main roads with lots of traffic, fast speed. So like Middle Road would probably be, I would guess, a 3. It might be a 2, but it probably is a 3 or
It's a
you know.
3.
Yeah,
I mean, without having actual data,
Yeah.
that's one of the main,
that's amazing.
it's,
Yeah, so especially with the speeds, I think it would be, that kind of like 3 or 4 range. But one of the things that I think is very helpful about a level of traffic stress map, and I actually have a statewide LTS map that I can share, is that you can look at it and kind of piece together sort of low stress streets that kind of can get you to places maybe somewhat indirectly, but at least it's a low stress way to bike someplace. And so that's something that I think would be useful as well. And I'm sure Nicole is very much aware of that, and looking at obviously the speeds and the traffic volumes and things like that. But at least for like the committee, looking at how can we like build like almost like a low stress kind of neighborhood connectors and things like that. So for example, if there was a Acushnet River access point, like a dock or something, and there's a subdivision that was like right up next to it, then there's like a subdivision that's like across the main road from that subdivision. You can basically kind of say, oh, well, we really should prioritize the crosswalk between these subdivisions. Or if the subdivisions are like offset, let's say that, the entrance to one subdivision is, at, a certain area on the main road, and then like 100 feet down the road is this other subdivision with tons of houses on it. Kind of maybe, building that like really high comfort crosswalk to get across, and then a short segment of like shared use path that's only like 100 feet or something, but it's just enough to get that neighborhood to have like a really low stress way to get to that like recreation site or whatever.
No,
I
mean, you're talking, I know exactly what you're talking about, because so I live almost at the very end of Acushnet this way, and I run into Acushnet.
Mhm.
So I basically do that. I go on South Main for as short an amount of time as I need to,
Yeah.
and then I go up and I back road it, all the different back roads, and I go all the way to the Acushnet Creamery, and I barely touch the main roads.
Right.
So I get that concept because I feel so much safer.
Right.
I'm not worried about cars flying by me. I might have one car that goes by me the whole time I'm on those roads.
Right, and I think a lot of people,
Makes sense.
yeah, a lot of people kind of go that route, because a lot of times it's the people that are looking to ride the shortest possible distance to get from point A to point B and don't mind the fast cars. They don't need the infrastructure. It's the people that are hesitant and reluctant to go across a crosswalk or go through an intersection or go down a stretch of busy road, that you want to provide them that facility to kind of like bridge the gap for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, one final thing I would say, just, you know, and Nicole, I know you're still listening, so, you know, maybe it's something for consideration of the Complete Streets prioritization plan, is like taking a hard look at the crosswalks in Acushnet, and where are the existing crosswalks and which crosswalks are already known to be like heavily traveled, because that is the kind of thing that I would definitely prioritize for, you know, improvements for that crosswalk. And one of the things that oftentimes gets forgotten about with crosswalks is lighting. And not just any kind of lighting, but like pedestrian scale lighting. You know, a lot of the lights that are on local roads, where they are mounted on local roads, a lot of times they're like lights that are up on a telephone pole, like 20 or 30 feet up in the air. And those lights are really just, for the most part, provided just to give a little bit of illumination for the overall road. But they're not typically sufficient enough to really well illuminate a pedestrian walking through an area, through a crosswalk. And the other thing too is the position of the light really matters. And so if the light is coming from, you know, behind a person, and there's a car approaching, that person might be invisible. Because the light's just coming from the wrong direction. Whereas if the light is kind of like blasting on their face, like headlights, all of a sudden now this person is very, very visible. And you know, obviously there's other things that you can do with crosswalks, whether that's like a median island. But the simplest thing with crosswalks that I always want to kind of emphasize is high visibility markings. So the continental style crosswalks, there's research to show that continental style crosswalks can be seen hundreds of feet earlier than traditional transverse line crosswalks in some cases.
Can you explain what a continental crosswalk is?
Yeah, absolutely. So a continental crosswalk is like the like large white rectangles that are kind of like not connected with like, so there's a ladder style crosswalk. Yeah, so a ladder style crosswalk is like transverse lines going from curb ramp to curb ramp and then ladder rungs in between. Continental style is the ladder just without the
With the diamonds.
The transverse lines connecting them. And yeah, the ladder style crosswalk is also considered a high visibility crosswalk. The continental style, what I just talked about, that's considered a high visibility crosswalk. But what often gets put down is a transverse line crosswalk, which is basically the parallel lines. And those are, not as visible when you are kind of approaching it as a motorist. And so it's one of those things that it's like, it's such an easy thing to kind of to know, and it's very actionable. It's just a matter of how you're applying paint to your roads and what style of painting actually does matter. And so I would just I will always try to recommend communities just consider the style of crosswalks that they are putting down, and trying to kind of incrementally convert especially the high usage crosswalks towards those high visibility pavement markings that we know are safer for folks. So I'm a big fan of high visibility crosswalks. So yeah.
You guys
Yeah, and I'll just
Go ahead, Nicole.
add on to that too, and the discussion of crosswalks, we're also going to be looking at the location of some of the existing crosswalks that are out there. So I'm just looking at Main Street right now where we have 4 crosswalks within like 200 feet. So there's just a lot going on there, and that's just like a pedestrian safety issue waiting to happen. People are really trying to focus on the road. There's that stop sign that just kind of like pops up on you. So, we're going to be looking at signage improvements as well, both at the crosswalk and in advance of the crosswalk, to get people, in that line of thinking that they're, changing from one context to another. Something that Acushnet has as well is a lot of, pretty significant speed differentiators. So it goes from 40 down to 25. So that's what we call a transition zone. So you're going from a really high speed down into like a village context where there's a lot more going on. So we want to make sure that we're slowing vehicles down as they approach that 25 mile per hour kind of limit there. So that's another thing that we're looking, like those crosswalks, those mid-block crosswalks that are located within those transition zones.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially for the Acushnet Center area, I would have to assume that there's probably some additional crosswalks that might be needed. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with Acushnet, but I find that oftentimes where the crosswalks are typically obviously used well, but there's a lot of places that I have found where there's people that just cross the street here because the crosswalk is a couple hundred feet that way and a couple hundred feet the other way, and it just makes more sense to just cross here. So I would say especially for the Acushnet Center, I would not be hesitant to maybe put in more crosswalks than is currently there, just because the other thing with crosswalks are that they can kind of be a little bit of like a traffic calming, kind of lowering speeds, and that's sort of what you want in your center of your town. So that would be something that you might want to look at as well, for where those crosswalks are, and trying to identify any potential locations where there might be a need for a new crosswalk. And Nicole, I want to say Slocum Street is getting rebuilt with a new sidewalk, I want to say as well, so that I want to say there probably is a crosswalk there, but if there's not, it definitely would need one there as well.
There isn't at this point, but
Okay.
there might be in the final version, because they just did sort of the,
Okay.
I don't know what it's called, but where they laid it down for the winter, and they'll
Got
keep
it,
doing
yeah.
So there might be when it's all said and done, but there isn't
Yeah.
one right now.
Yeah.
Well, the town should, the DPW should know about those continental sidewalks, continental crosswalks.
They might not. I mean, they might know them as high visibility crosswalks. I think one of the things that if they might not know, the specific research about high visibility pavement markings, being more easily seen by motorists. But, in some cases, these crosswalk styles that I'm talking about might actually require more paint or more thermoplastic tape, which is like, instead of painting, they actually put down almost like a plastic kind of thing because it's more reflective. But thermoplastic tape costs a lot of money. More paint obviously costs more than, transverse lines are relatively simple and straightforward. And so a pushback, on crosswalk, pavement marking, increasing the budget line item for that might not be like in the town's, plans. But I think it's definitely a conversation that I think should be had, because for certain areas, if I saw a bunch of the sort of yellow crosswalks that are already around, and I do think that sort of transverse line with white and then the yellow in that is more visible than just the white lines themselves. But But yeah, I would say, I think the contrast is another thing that makes the Continental and the Ladder style a little bit more apparent, because it's white, bright white on black, and so the contrast kind of gets people to see it a little bit easier. And so yeah, I think that that sort of, you know, Acushnet Center area, definitely the high visibility crosswalks all through there would be definitely a priority. And I think that you know, for the South Main project with Mass DOT, I think they probably will include the high visibility markings, but outside of the Mass DOT projects, it might not be. So that's where I would kind of, you know, be cognizant when you're kind of looking at potential designs that come down the pipeline.
Good information.
Yeah, real good. Anything else, Nicole?
No, just encourage you all to take the online survey if you haven't already. You know, feel free to share with family, friends, other departments, all of that stuff. The more data points we have, the better. Not only for this project, but for, you know, the town of Acushnet altogether. Having like all of that public input really helps like build the case when the town goes to start applying for grants. They kind of have like some idea of what the community is already thinking. So we'll be, you know, handing over all of that raw data to Victoria and the DPW to kind of do what they wish with it. But yeah, there's on that flyer too, so that links you to our kind of project website. So you can also look at all of the, you know, existing data that we're already collecting as well, and kind of just get some more background information on the project as a whole. So this, you know, site will be updated. So once we have our draft list of projects, we're going to map those all out. We're going to put them on this website. We're going to have another round of public outreach, and people will actually be able to, you know, slide projects and rank them, so that we have like a little bit more, you know, community input in this as well. And you'll see on the online survey right now that's running, there are a handful of questions about, you know, how the community wants to prioritize like sidewalks over bike lanes. Do they want to expand the network or focus on the existing network? You know, how would they like to see projects prioritized once we do have that, you know, kind of final draft list? So all of that like data, you know, collection is very helpful for us. So please share, and I'm sure I will see you all again pretty soon once we have that draft list.
So,
But,
Nicole,
yeah.
before we wrap up, do you have a date for when the survey will come down?
So we had our outreach on the 27th, so I'll probably leave it up until the end of the month.
Okay.
I just created a paper copy actually for Sandra at the library, because some folks have been going in and just want to take a paper survey for that, so she's going to be printing out some of those. Victoria's going to have a few distributed as well, and I think Victoria said she had like all of the boards from our you know, pop-up event up at Town Hall as well, so folks can kind of go in and mark those up. But yeah, it's been you know, a pretty good response thus far, and a lot of like really thoughtful comments coming in, which is really great. So
Thank you. Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, John. It was
Thank you,
really,
John.
really a
Always
lot of
happy
information.
to,
A
yeah.
lot of information you.
Yeah, and Nicole, great to virtually meet you, and I'm sure we'll potentially cross paths at some point in the future.
Likewise, yes, nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around if you want to, you know, if you have anything else for Nicole, you know, or if you want to let her go, or I don't know if you've got anything else on the agenda.
No, I think we're
Yeah, for
pretty
now.
much wrapping up now, yeah.
For now, thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole.
Awesome, thank you all so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
So, yeah, that was great, John. You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
We've got a
I
lot of
mean,
work to do.
we just pulled that middle road idea.
Yeah, and it makes
But-
perfect sense. I think
Yeah.
looking at Acushnet,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on the map, I think Middle Road comes off as like, oh, this is a, important road that, and then you look at, how wide it is and you think, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think, putting on my like Mass DOT, like grant, reviewer kind of like lens on, I would say, yeah, trying to build off of your South Main project probably is gonna get you something that's a little bit more competitive. I don't know if, I'm assuming SRTA has a bus that runs through the center, does it?
I don't think
No,
so.
Acushnet,
Does
no.
not?
Acushnet does not.
Lund's
have a
Corner,
bus.
I think Lund's
Lund's
Corner.
Corner is the closest.
If you go
So
to,
there's nothing that services like the housing authority, or, okay.
No.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that MassDOT, that's right in their wheelhouse. If there's a bus stop, they would love to, do a project that improves a bus stop or access to a bus stop. And so if you don't have a bus stop in Acushnet, then,
I mean, I would think that the closest one would be on Tarpon Hill Road. So
Yeah.
if we sort of put our focus, and this is just throwing ideas out there.
Yeah.
But if we put our focus on Maine, right, that would then connect the work they're doing on Tarpon Hill Road to Maine, which
Yeah.
would then connect it to South Maine.
and then to Slocum, so that they
Right,
can kind of
that
just like
whole
loop
just-
through the center.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, if we sort of focus, but we can tease that out more, but
We-
that's just,
yeah, Sandy Medeiros had actually, we talked, and I have an email that you and her were going back and forth about what you talked about at the path along the river.
yeah.
Because
Yes.
one thing, there's a little path at the bottom of Slocum Street now that
Yes.
goes from Main Street over to next to where you live, Slocum. Well, kind of
Is it
connecting.
like River's End
Yeah,
or something?
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we thought, maybe someday we could try to get that, some kind of connection and have a path connected to behind the river, along the river.
Well,
Right, because you got
Yeah.
the utility corridor that runs
Right,
along
right.
the river there, and I want to say, yeah, if you could, connect that sort of existing sort of shared use path, in the case where you've got that sort of wide facility, it's a bike path, sort of next to the road. They call it a side path. So shared use path, it's interchangeable with side path, but if you could, cross Slocum and then, is that the Titleist
That's
facility?
the Tyler's,
right there?
yes.
If you could
Tyler's building.
get across
Yeah.
and get, I don't know if there's, another kind of thing to look at would be like if there's like a paper street off of
Yeah,
there.
I don't know if, I know there's a couple, but I don't know if they're there.
Yeah. We'd have to go down there in the spring and take a walk down there.
Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah,
see what's
look
available.
at the
See
maps
what's,
to
if we have an idea,
Yeah.
and if it's possible. we
Winter
can
time is
propose it.
when there's not snow, now.
Well, yeah, not
obviously
right
there's
now.
Snow,
Yeah.
but winter time is also a good time.
Right, 'cause everything's
fall,
bare.
late fall. Anytime you've got the leaves off the trees, it's much easier to see like
Mhm.
landform, and so
are.
like it's there in my role. Always looking at like old railroad beds that are abandoned,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's crazy, seeing like just a vegetated wall of trees in like the spring or summer, and then all of a sudden the leaves are gone, and you can clearly
There's this-
see,
yeah.
oh, there's the old railroad bed, like very easy to see. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, if you're trying to kind of like look at, where, like I was talking about before, kind of like, oh, there's a subdivision here and a subdivision here, and there's a town paper street, right? Looking at it in like the winter, when there's not snow on the ground, you can kind of maybe get a sense of, oh, okay, they didn't build the street there because there's a wetland there. It's something like,
Yeah.
it becomes more apparent.
Right.
Okay.
But one thing that I did want to just mention as well would be for the South Main project. I believe, I had a conversation with Diane Hayes, who is the Assistant Project Development Engineer at MassDOT District 5. She was talking with me about the South Main project as it relates to the South Coast Bikeway And then she was also asking me about Slocum Street. She was trying to get some more information about it. I guess there was potentially an earmark for funding the Slocum Street sidewalks. But she had indicated that the shared use path was going to basically start around like the Fairhaven town line
Yeah.
and go up, and then once you get into more of like the like center of Acushnet Center, like basically north of Slocum Street, it sounded like they might not be doing the shared use path on that segment.
That's right here.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to say they were planning to have like on-street parking along one or both sides
Really?
Good.
of the South Main to sort of start. It seemed like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the town may have a bit of a priority of almost developing more in the town center of like
Well, they talked
more
about
like commercial business, storefront kind of like walkable place. I don't know,
the
but
stores that are there can't even stay open.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
parking. That's why probably.
So that was one of the things that I think that the plan was to potentially add parking on one or both sides of South Main, and I just thought that looking at it, I totally get wanting on-street parking for like some of those businesses that are along there, and I think there's like there's at least one or two restaurants, but it made me think that it might be a little bit of a missed opportunity if the shared use path doesn't continue
It ends
through,
Slocum.
Yeah.
because as I was, we've talked about having the South Coast Bikeway have sort of an alternate route through Acushnet Center, and if you've got a path that leads to Acushnet Center and then it stops,
Yeah.
it's not a very high comfort facility. And so, I was just sort of like looking at that South Main sort of stretch between Slocum and Main Street and seeing, you've got some like paper streets or real streets that kind of branch off on the sides there.
Yeah.
That might be like a better place for parking. Obviously, I think the residents that live along those side streets, they might not want that, and I totally get that. The other thought too was I want to say the town hall campus might have some additional town-owned properties that are like this direction, so south from the town hall. I could be wrong in this, but I want to say there might be some opportunities to have like more parking in this general area, potentially if there's like a paper street. I'll have to look at the map,
I
but
think it's that
but
bit you're talking about. There's
Yeah.
there's like almost like a lot.
okay, yeah. So if there's an existing lot or something, yeah, sort of
Yeah, make
figuring
that
out a way to.
public, right? Make that public parking versus.
Yeah, so figuring out a way to try, if possible, to get the shared use path to continue along the whole stretch and not dead end. I think that would, if I was on the committee, I think I would be advocating for that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be a difficult challenge to try to get like a South Coast Bikeway sort of route through Acushnet Center if you don't
If it
have that component of the project. So because if you don't have that component, then you have to find an alternate sort of path. So it would just kind of create a bunch of challenges that I have just got.
Well, why don't they go
Yeah.
through, why don't they go like Belleville Avenue or Mill Road? Mill Road goes along the river, right before the bridge,
Yeah, it
That takes-
certainly could.
That
Yeah.
takes away all this right here, all this center of town and everything, right?
Are you talking about for the South
For
Coast
the
Bikeway?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a map handy, so I can't visualize it. But yeah, I mean, it certainly could theoretically go down like Slocum,
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like, okay, well, you're building sidewalks on there right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah,
and
and they did not include.
it's not a shared use path, and so,
Yep,
it just becomes harder and harder to get sort of that planned connection as you sort of invest in only sidewalk. And it's not to say that, folks were gonna ride their bike on a sidewalk regardless of what anyone tells them to do.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not great,
Beautiful
like I love sidewalks, but yeah, in terms of how, if you're trying to think strategically about how Acushnet can really like grab the South Coast Bikeway by the horns and say, we are going to kind of like fully be a part of this.
Yeah.
It seems like, making sure, at least trying to get some concession of having the shared use path continue. And, that might be a difficult conversation about parking, and I don't envy any kind of conversations about, trying to take away potential parking spaces from, businesses, because they do rely on it. But I think that, perhaps you can talk about maybe some other opportunities to have sort of parking more on like the back of buildings, on the side of the streets, or in the town hall campus area, or, kind of like figuring out ways to have, shared parking arrangements and things like that. I did the regional bicycle plan and the regional pedestrian plan. I'm also working on the regional parking utilization assessment. And, parking is a hard one because everyone thinks there's not enough of it. And the reality is, in a lot of cases, there's plenty. It's just that when people want to park and there isn't a space, they immediately think there's not enough parking. But they might not see, parking that's behind a building, or all these places that are around them. And so, we are always trying to kind of emphasize, thinking about parking and safety, and parking is really a convenience question, and it's how convenient is it to go to a place, but when you're talking about a shared use path, you're talking about safety. And safety in transportation planning,
Should trump.
safety really should be the top priority, and convenience for one specific mode, should be a little bit lower. Not, it's not like at the bottom, but it's lower than safety typically. That's not always going to be carried out in practice. Obviously, there's differences of opinion about that. But yeah, we would, if there's a proposal to do like parking on both sides of the street, you might want to consider trying to advocate for maybe just one side, give yourself the opportunity to have that shared use path or separated facility up through the entire corridor. But yeah, I tend to talk a lot, so I apologize.
That's why you're here.
But,
That's why you're here, John.
I'm always available. Yeah, you can always.
When is that starting? Is it this year or South Main? Do you know?
South Main.
offhand?
Oh no, that's probably multiple years off.
Years off. Okay.
Yeah, typically.
That's right, they haven't even finished,
It could be multiple. I honestly, I don't know if it's even been allocated funding to build it yet. So it might be more than 5 years off. I would have to look at where that process. I believe it's pre 25% design. I'm not entirely sure, but that's one of the challenges. Is certainly funding for big projects like that. It takes a while, and so I got my start in bike planning on the Taunton Pathways Committee, and we had an old railroad bed in Taunton that we started, it was part of a Taunton River Trail multi-mile, kind of like the South Coast Bikeway, we started that process in like 2016, 2017, and that rail trail went from 3 or 4 million to 11 million to 18 million to now 27 million. And then when it gets constructed in 2030, it'll be 30 million. So it went basically 10x up in price, for reasons that are very frustrating, including, we need this, shared use path bridge to be not 10 feet up off the road, it needs to be 17 feet up off the road so a tractor trailer truck can go. It's like all these, okay, well, we're dramatically increasing the bicycle and pedestrian cost because of trucks, and so it's like,
Right.
the project has become very expensive for reasons that are not really bicycle friendly. It's not. It's not improving
Other
safety.
people's issues.
Yeah. So these projects can take a while. The South Main project, I'm not sure when it is, but typically if it gets to like 25% design, you might have a better idea of when that construction might be, and it really depends on how the designer for the project, if they are advancing the project on the timeline that MassDOT is expecting, then it'll proceed on like a regular sort of like normal scheduling kind of. But in what we have seen at Serpent is if the town is not saying, hey, designer, we need to make this 25% design submittal deadline, if the town isn't kind of advancing or kind of making sure that their designer is meeting sort of the benchmark dates for submittals and things like that, projects can fall behind. So we always try to encourage municipalities to really like stay on your designer to make sure that they're reaching those milestones when they should be, to kind of keep you on track. So yeah, that's just one additional kind of thought that I'm not saying that I have any inkling that Acushnet is not moving this project at a normal pace, but it's just something to be wary of, because projects where they are kind of falling behind, what happens is the cost goes up and it goes up and it goes up because inflation. It just every year every project goes up in a certain percentage because it's just the cost of materials and everything else. So it's always trying to beat the clock to not have it be over budget by $1 million because it's someone didn't submit the design in time. So
Well, thank you.
absolutely,
Thank you, John.
yeah.
Okay, make a motion, we adjourn?
Is there anything else on the agenda, or?
No.
That's it, we're done.
Okay.
We're closing up.
All right, all right.
Business and,
I kept you too long.
All right, hey, where are you from, John?
I'm originally from Dighton, and then I went to UMass Amherst, and then I moved to Taunton after that. But I feel Dighton and Acushnet are very, very similar
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a lot of ways.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Kind of like a small, charming town right next to like a more of a major
That's
city,
beautiful.
So sort of always sort of relying on that sort of nearby city for a lot of different things, but also having that small special feeling about your town.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my Eagle Scout project back in 2008 was a nature trail on an old railroad bed in South
cool.
Dighton, and so never would have thought that trail building would be my profession.
Become your-
when I was, in Boy Scouts, but
Yeah.
hey,
Right.
that
Hey,
was
you
my
never know.
my first foray into.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's it pays the bills, which is better than I told you I started on the Taunton Pathways Committee. I was just a volunteer, and now I'm a salaried
this.
employee at Serpent, so I kind of
Awesome.
it's pretty good. But I always want to be a resource for you folks. So if you got any questions, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, definitely try to keep tabs on the South Main project,
Yeah.
and anytime you see like a design that gets released or whatever, let me know, and I'd be happy to take a look and let you
Okay.
know my thoughts on it. you know, anytime you have a question or whatever and you want to run it by me, always feel free.
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks a lot.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
And yeah, we're also working
Depending
on.
where you, I think you actually go out that door, you don't, I don't know where
Okay.
you're parked, but.
Yeah, and so
that lot.
this one right here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was- yeah,
It looks like the whole building's closed, but it's actually right
Yeah.
there.
Got
so, Yeah.
As I was talking about, you know, lights for crosswalks, you know, light.
I know.
light there, you
Thanks for
know?
the guests, the special guests.
Exactly. You know,
Right?
some
For those of us that
continental
don't know
crosswalks, you know.
We'll give you a flashlight, brother. How's that?
Yeah, sounds good,
Right,
yeah.
right.
All right, thanks, folks.
Thank you
Okay,
very
John,
much.
thank you, buddy.
Okay, can I have a motion to,
New business, just go down.
oh, new business?
There's none,
Yeah.
right? No new business?
No new business.
And then our next meeting is March 12th.
Yes,
Right.
March 12th.
Do I know if it's here or you'll?
Yeah, it's here.
It's here,
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry, Eric.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, so next meeting is March 12th. Can I get a motion?
Okay, I make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wow.